So I guess as a quick primer on what we do and how that fits into my perspective on social media, Songkick is all about one simple problem, which is knowing when your favourite bands are playing near you. So the idea is, historically, to find out about concerts in your area for bands you like, you'd have to go and browse MySpace, venue websites, get these giant bulk emails from Ticketmaster, and it's quite a lot of work. And our idea was to say that should be simpler. It should be as easy as finding out what's going on near you in the movies. So we built Songkick to solve that problem. What it does is Songkick is effectively a little robot that goes and scours the web and finds out about every concert happening, whether it's a tiny little show in a coffee shop or a giant show at the O2 Arena, whether it's in London, whether it's in San Francisco, whether it's in Singapore, Sao Paulo, or wherever around the world. So we have the largest database of concerts in the world, and then as a fan, you come along to us and you tell us which bands you care about. And you do that automatically by giving us access to your iTunes library or your Last.fm profile or your Facebook profile. And from that point onwards, any of the bands that we know you like, if, for example, one of them announces a show in London, we'll email you before anybody else and say, hey, this band that you like is coming to London, here are the tickets. So it takes all the hassle out of finding out about concerts. That's the core idea. And I founded it in 2007 with two of my friends. And it's grown really well. So, I mean, the last 12 months, we've grown 8x in terms of monthly people coming to our site. And as of last week, we're now the second largest concert site in the entire world after Ticketmaster. So it's starting to grow pretty nicely. And a lot of that is down to social media. And I guess, rather than sort of giving you a whole bunch more information about Songkick, I'll talk a bit more about how I think, in general, web products fit into social media. So I think the first thing is that a lot of people, and especially social media experts, which I certainly don't claim to be, but I'm incredibly skeptical of, sort of talk about social media like this mysterious thing that you have to you build a product and then you put social media into it afterwards. And I think the right way to think about it is that essentially everything on the web is social media. Everything is in some ways media. I could have historically media was an impression on a radio station or on a newspaper. But nowadays any web page effectively can have an ad served on it and can in some ways be classified as media. And almost everything good happening on the web nowadays has become social as a result of Facebook, Twitter, and all these other things. So I think it's better just to think of the web as social media overall. And I think it's sort of the price of entry if you're going to build anything good on the web now, to think about it from a social perspective. And I think that there's a really exciting fundamental story behind the social transformation of the web, which is good ideas spread faster than ever before. And that's an amazing thing for entrepreneurs. It's a huge change in the barrier to entry to having a good idea and having tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people using it. And I think a really good example of that is this product called Chat Roulette, which was a very quirky idea started by this Russian teenager from his parents' kitchen. And the basic idea was you could go online, you'd be paired up with a random stranger somewhere else on the internet with a video chat, and you just talk to each other. And then if you didn't like them, you'd hit next. And then you talk to someone else, and you just get, like roulette, you chat with people. And he just made this in his bedroom as something to, just for him and his friends to play around with. And within, I think, about a month, the site had ballooned to 5 million people using it every month. And then within maybe 3 months, it ballooned to 30 million a month. And that's a teenager sitting in his bedroom, came up with a cool idea, and it just spread like wildfire. And the reason for that is that we're all connected now through social networks. If I found Chat Roulette and I thought it was a really cool idea, I could I found this really cool thing called Chat Roulette. And all my friends see it, and then some of them think it's cool as well. They spread it, and things can just explosively grow now, whereas previously they couldn't. And there's examples of this every day in the press of a product launching and getting to like 100,000 users within 2 months. And it's pretty amazing. And I think that the biggest lesson that any entrepreneur should take away from that is not, how can I mess with, social networks to grow? But, if you make something truly brilliant and truly great and truly, unique and special, it will grow as a result of the fact that people can share great things easier than ever before. And I think the most elegant phrase I've ever heard to describe that is quality is hyper efficient. You know, nowadays quality really, really matters. And if you come up with something that's of a very high quality, it then becomes very, very efficient in how it grows. So, you know, before thinking about how you tack Facebook into your product and Twitter into your product, just think about making something really good. And a lot of this sort of organically happens from there. But how it happens can kind of be classified into two different things. There's what is sort of typically called word of mouth growth, which is, you know, I think it's really good, so I tell some other people. And there's nothing within the product sort of prompting me to tell other people or encouraging me to tell other people. It's just the product's good and I tell someone. So, you know, for example, you know, a way that our product might spread via word of mouth is two friends meet up at a concert. One of those bought the tickets, and the one who didn't buy the ticket says, "Hey, how did you find out about this show at, you know, the O2?" And they say, "Oh, I use this site Songkick, it's really good, it does this for me." That's sort of word of mouth growth. The other kind of way to use social properties to drive distribution is to build it into the product as an explicit call to action or implicit call to action for the user. So, for example, someone who finds a concert through Songkick, it could say, "Now share this with your friends on Facebook. Who do you want to invite? Here are some friends you could invite." Make it a lot more explicit and essentially, you know, create a greater chance that the user is going to share it. But again, it all starts with a good product. So, you know, nowadays on the web, I think there are effectively 3 distribution platforms that matter. There's Google, which is, you know, people looking for information and potentially finding it through your site. There's people sharing things they find, whether it's information or entertaining content or whatever, via Facebook, Twitter, and other social platforms. And then there's mobile applications, which in themselves are a kind of new distribution channel because of the marketing promotion that Apple and Android are putting behind things, because of the fact that you can sit next to someone, you know, at a table and show them a product, whereas you weren't really able to do that with websites as easily before because we wouldn't sit next to each other and browse the web. So you know, those are the 3 fundamental distribution platforms on the internet now. And the great news is they're all free, and 2 of them are, you know, very, very social at the core. You know, mobile is very social naturally, and so is obviously Facebook and Twitter, etc. The way that I would think about this stuff, if you're sort of trying to think about how your product grows, is to think about how many people the average new user to your service is willing to spread it to. So, you know, let's say someone in the front row is so excited by my description of Songkick that later on this evening they go home and they sign up and they have a good experience, and maybe they email like 2 friends about it. And then those 2 friends, one of the friends just ignores the email because they don't trust your recommendations about anyone. You know, the other friend is like, "Oh, that sounds cool," goes on the site, and but gets a bit confused and doesn't register. But maybe next time, you know, the next person emails 5 people, and one of those successfully registers. And that person who's successfully registered, you know, is then sort of subject to the same desire to share it, and they share it, and, you know, they invite some people. And what you've got there is, kind of going back to GCSE maths, a geometric series, you know, first person, the next person times the number of people they successfully invite, etc., etc., etc. And there's a magic formula where if the person in the front row who signs up to the service successfully invites at least one other person to the service, 1.1 people, 1.2 people, you get you get exponential viral growth. Otherwise, you just get fairly linear growth. So at that magic point, growth is completely transformed. And most people in Silicon Valley or web companies all over the world are obsessed with this viral coefficient and what number it's at and how close they are to that magic tipping point. So you kind of want to think about ways to motivate and excite your users to share the product with as many people as possible, as successfully as possible. And usually that happens when there's value derived from sharing the product. So Skype, I think, is an amazing example of this because, you know, for me to have a free phone call with my friend in China, I, you know, have to get them using Skype. It's not as useful to me if they're not using it. So there's a huge imperative for me to use the product in order to get value from the product. And the more friends I have using Skype, the more useful it is for me. So inherently there's a reason to share. And that's usually the case with any sort of communications utility because, you know, you have to have other people on it for it to spread. And that's why, you know, the telephone, email, Skype have all spread very, very virally. But there's other ways of doing this. So I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with a company called Dropbox, but When we founded Songkick, we did it as part of this program in Silicon Valley. We moved over to the States called Y Combinator. And Dropbox were one of our classmates in that group, and I'm very close with the team there. And they had a really smart approach to this, which is say, how can we create value for both the person inviting a friend to the service and the person receiving the invitation to maximize the chance that they're going to accept the invitation. And so on Dropbox, it's all about sharing files. And as a user, you want as much file space as possible. So they created an invitation which said, if you share Dropbox with a friend, you will get 5 gigabytes of free storage space. So that incentivizes me to invite friends. But then even more brilliantly, they then had on the other side of it, the invitation said, if you accept this invitation, you're going to get this much free space. So both parties in the kind of the sharing were incentivized to complete the transaction. And that's just an example of the kind of the way to think about this stuff. How do I incentivize a user to share, and how do I incentivize the other user to actually open and accept the invitation? And I think something that drops out of all of those kind of thoughts is that nowadays, product and marketing, I don't really think of them as being separate things. So I think historically, in non-online businesses, you'd have a bunch of people making the product, and then you'd have a bunch of people marketing it. Whereas nowadays, I have one person in my team doing marketing, and they're effectively a product manager, because all of these sorts of things, like designing what Dropbox did is called a two-sided affiliate program. Actually designing that and baking in the product is product work. Or designing a clever Facebook app that spreads virally, or designing the invitation mechanic within Skype or Facebook. All that stuff is fundamentally product work. So nowadays, the line between product and marketing is blurring as a result of everything becoming social media. So just a few other random thoughts on this stuff. I think that it's hard doing this stuff in London because there aren't that many people, I think, who think very sophisticatedly about this in London. Just because we just don't have as many people who've been...
They're all here.
No. I mean, I would argue that, none of us here probably think about this as sophisticatedly as the best thinkers in Silicon Valley, and we're all, sort of trying to play catch up. And I think that the reason for that is we haven't been through as much. This is Fraser and I. This is our first companies, right? So we're figuring this out as we go. Whereas you've got people in Silicon Valley like Mark Andreessen, who sits on the board of Facebook. Co-founded Netscape, has been invested in every single great social product in the Valley. So the amount of insight there is phenomenal. So I just think that one thing you probably should accept if you're starting a business that you really want to take and become a big global brand is you just need to spend some time in the Valley. And you just need to spend some time with those people, week here, week there. I've got loads more stuff to say in the Q&A.